Hello everyone. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and let's go.
Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. Caleb gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Honda Civic, staring blankly at the sea of red taillights clogging I-35. It was typical Austin traffic, going nowhere fast. A grueling 10-hour shift at the firm had drained the life out of him, and all he could fantasize about was silence, his worn-out sectional, and zoning out to whatever was trending on Netflix. Vanessa, his wife, sat in the passenger seat, the blue light of her iPhone illuminating her face as her thumb scrolled rhythmically through Instagram. The car was filled with a rare, peaceful silence, the kind Caleb usually cherished. But, as usual, Vanessa had other plans. "Hey Caleb," she started, her voice pitching up with that feigned enthusiasm he knew all too well. She slid her phone into her purse. "Guess what?" Caleb side-eyed her, keeping his hands at 10 and 2. He knew that tone. It was sugar-coated trouble. "What?" he asked cautiously, trying to mask the dread creeping into his voice. "Everyone is meeting up for drinks tonight," she announced, beaming. "You remember the Drifter, right? That spot over on East 6th? We're just gonna pop in for a bit. Everyone's dying to see you." "Ness, come on," Caleb sighed, his grip on the wheel tightening. "It's been a hell of a day. Let's just head home. I've got some leftover pasta in the fridge, and we still have 3 episodes of that show to get through." "Oh, stop being such a grandpa," she pressed, her tone sharpening just a fraction. "You're always like this. Jessica, Chris, Ryan, they were literally just asking about you. Don't you want to have a life for once?" "Who's asking? Jessica? Chris? Ryan?" Caleb raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Half the time, those people don't even remember I exist." Vanessa rolled her eyes, a gesture so practiced it was practically a reflex. "You're being dramatic. They love you. You're just afraid to leave your little comfort bubble. It'll be quick, I promise." Caleb knew he didn't really have a vote. He could already tell Shed sent the confirmation text before she even opened her mouth. Defeated, he merged into the exit lane. "Fine. But just for a drink. I am serious." She lit up like Head just bought her a Tiffany necklace. "That's the spirit. It's going to be fun, you'll see." Walking into the Drifter was an assault on the senses, a thick mix of craft beer, expensive cologne, and the faint lingering scent of brisket from the food truck out back. The bar was bathed in moody industrial lighting that washed everyone out in hues of neon pink and electric blue. The place was packed, a hive of loud laughter, clinking glasses, and tech bros shouting over the indie rock playlist. Vanessa navigated the crowd like a pro, leading him to a large booth in the back. Her crew was already there. Jessica was the first to spot them, jumping up and waving her arms like she was flagging down a rescue chopper. "Finally!" she shrieked, flashing a blindingly white smile. "Caleb, you actually crawled out of your man cave?" A ripple of laughter went around the table. Caleb managed a tight, polite smile. It was the same old routine every time he got dragged along to these things. He slid into the booth without a word, feeling the tension settle in his shoulders. "How'd you manage to drag him out, Ness?" Chris asked, winking conspiratorially. "Bet you had to threaten to cancel the Wi-Fi." "Just a little patience and the promise of a designated driver," Vanessa shot back, winking at him. The table erupted in laughter again. Caleb clenched his jaw. He felt like an alien in this ecosystem of inside jokes and superficial charm. Vanessa, however, was in her element. She laughed the loudest, playing into the dynamic where he was the punchline. "So Caleb," Jessica chirped, swirling her Pinot Grigio. "Tell us, what's it like staring at spreadsheets all day? You're in finance, right? Must be thrilling." More snickering. Caleb forced a sip of his beer. "It pays the mortgage," he said dryly. "A job that turns him into a total hermit," Vanessa added, taking a long sip of her margarita. "But not tonight, right? Tonight, he's actually going to be fun." Her words were wrapped in a smile, but the barb underneath hooked into him. It was her signature move, passive-aggressive digs disguised as banter. He stared down at his drink, gripping the glass hard enough to turn his knuckles white. "Hey, let's make a toast to Caleb." Chris shouted, standing up and raising his IPA. To the man who makes being boring look like an art form. The laughter swelled, and Vanessa beamed like she was watching a comedy special. Caleb felt the heat rising in his neck. He wasn't going to cause a scene, not here, but his patience had officially flatlined. "Excuse me," he muttered, standing up abruptly. "I need some air." Vanessa shot him a look of mild annoyance. "Ugh, Caleb, don't be so sensitive. We're just messing with you." He didn't respond. He pushed his way through the crowd and shoved the heavy front door open, letting the humid Texas night hit him in the face. Caleb stepped onto the sidewalk, the noise of the bar instantly muffled behind him. The air was thick and warm, typical for Austin, but it felt better than the suffocating atmosphere inside. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his pulse. It was amazing how 30 minutes with Vanessa's friends could turn a bad day into a nightmare. Just get through it, he told himself. 30 more minutes, toss back a water, and drag her home. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, a Slack notification from a coworker. He ignored it. His mind was too focused on Vanessa, on her shrill laughter, and how easily she threw him under the bus for a cheap laugh. He didn't want to go back in, but loitering on 6th Street wasn't exactly a great plan either. He hesitated, then turned back toward the door. As he walked past the entrance, he slowed down. The noise inside was deafening, bass thumping, people shouting. But suddenly, the urge to use the restroom hit him. He decided to bypass the table and head straight for the back. Caleb navigated the dimly lit corridor toward the restrooms. The area was surprisingly empty, the roar of the bar dampened by the distance. He pushed the door to the men's room, but the stalls were occupied. Impatient, he looked further down the hall to the single-occupancy, gender-neutral restroom at the end. As he approached, he heard a sound. It was a muffled, intimate giggle coming from behind the closed door. Caleb frowned, freezing in place. He took a step closer. The sounds became clearer. It wasn't just laughter. "You are out of your mind," a woman whispered, her voice breathless and laced with amusement. Caleb recognized that voice instantly. It was Vanessa. His heart hammered against his ribs, his palms instantly slick with sweat. He stepped closer, straining his ears. A man's voice answered, low, arrogant, confident. "And you couldn't help yourself, could you?" It was Ryan. Caleb stood there, paralyzed. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to leave, to pretend he hadn't heard it. But his feet were rooted to the sticky floor. His eyes locked onto the door handle. The occupied indicator wasn't fully read. The latch hadn't caught properly. He summoned every ounce of adrenaline in his system and shoved the door open. The scene hit him like a physical blow. Vanessa was pressed up against the graffiti-covered wall, her face flushed, her blouse unbuttoned enough to look messy. Ryan was leaning over her, crowding her space, their faces inches apart. His hand was resting high on her thigh, fingers gripping the fabric of her skirt. They froze, like deer in headlights. "Shit," Ryan breathed, stumbling back a step. His tone wasn't apologetic, it was defensive, laced with that frat boy arrogance he couldn't quite shake. Vanessa whipped her head away, her face draining of color until she looked like a ghost. She took a shaky step forward, her mouth opening as if to spin some story, but Caleb held up a hand, silencing her. "Not a word," he seethed through clenched teeth. His voice was cold, hard as concrete. He shifted his gaze to Ryan, who was looking at him with a pathetic mix of embarrassment and defiance. "You," Caleb started, pointing a shaking finger directly at his chest. "Don't you ever touch my wife again." "Whoa, easy man," Ryan said, raising his hands in a mock surrender, palms out. "It's really not what you think." Caleb let out a short, dark laugh that felt like gravel in his throat. "Seriously? Not what I think? Are you actually that stupid?" Caleb stepped back, nodding slowly, as if confirming a reality he never wanted to accept. He turned to Vanessa, who was still paralyzed, struggling to find her voice. "And you? You got anything to say? Or are you done?" "Caleb, please," she stammered, her voice thin and pathetic. Without another word, Caleb turned on his heel and walked out of the bathroom, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. He stormed down the hallway, ignoring the confused looks from patrons, ignoring the thumping bass, ignoring everything. The cool night air hit him again outside, but it did nothing to cool the fire raging in his chest. Caleb stood on the curb for a second, fists clenched, breathing raggedly. He felt like he was going to explode. He didn't scream. He didn't punch a wall. Instead, he got into his Honda, slammed the door, and peeled out onto the street, heading home. The house was dead silent when he walked in, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator. The usual comfort of his living room now felt suffocating, foreign. He threw his keys onto the kitchen island with enough force that they skidded across the granite and clattered onto the floor. Vanessa walked through the door 20 minutes later. She must have called an Uber immediately. She looked rattled, but he could see her trying to compose herself, putting on that mask she wore so well. "Caleb," she started quietly, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. "Let's talk about this." He spun around, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and betrayal. "Talk? About what? About how I just caught you with Ryan in a dive bar bathroom? Or about how you're going to try and spin this?" She took a step forward, raising her hands as if to calm a wild animal. "It's not what you think," she said again. Caleb laughed bitterly, shaking his head in disbelief. "Not what I think. Are you kidding me? I saw everything, Vanessa. Everything." Her face twisted in shame, but she still tried to maintain control. "It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. I don't know." Caleb held up a hand, cutting her off. "Stop," his voice was low, threatening. "Save the excuses. You're pathetic." He turned and marched toward the bedroom, trying to keep the lid on his emotions. He didn't want to punch a hole in the drywall. He wanted the truth. All of it. No matter how ugly it was. Vanessa's purse was on the floor where Shed dropped it. He stopped, staring at it. She always left her phone in there. It was a habit. A bad one. A war waged inside him. Violating her privacy felt wrong, but that hesitation lasted less than a second. The anger won. He scooped up the bag and fished out her iPhone. The screen lit up. To his surprise, the passcode hadn't changed. She hadn't even bothered to hide her secrets. "What are you doing?" Vanessa asked from the doorway, her face pale. Caleb shot her a look of icy calm. "Do you really want to know?" Her eyes went wide, and she stepped forward. "Caleb, put it down. That's an invasion of privacy." "Privacy?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "That's rich coming from you." He unlocked the phone. His thumb hovered over the green messaging icon. He didn't have to search. The thread with Ryan was right near the top. The messages started innocent enough. Memes, office gossip. But as he scrolled up, the tone shifted. Flirting. Innuendo. Then, blatant confessions. "Ryan, you have no idea what you do to me." "Vanessa, you're in my head too much, but I like it." "Ryan, last night was insane. You were incredible." "Vanessa, you make me happy. I missed this feeling." His eyes scanned the text, every word feeling like a physical blow to the gut. He didn't even realize Vanessa had moved closer until he felt her hand on his arm. "Caleb, please don't." Her voice cracked. He shook her off violently.
Don't, Vanessa?
"Are you serious?" He looked back at the screen. He kept scrolling. Then came the photos. The first was innocent, a selfie in her car, smiling. But the next few made his blood boil. They were personal. Intimate. Explicit. He felt physically sick looking at them. He whipped around to face her, holding the phone up like evidence in a murder trial. "You want to explain this?" She shrank back. "It's not what you think." "Stop saying that," he roared, his voice finally breaking into a shout. "It's right here, Vanessa. All of it. You were sending him this garbage while I was at work? While I thought we were fine." She buried her face in her hands, her voice muffled. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know it would go this far." He shook his head slowly, his eyes going dead. "You knew. You knew exactly what you were doing." Caleb couldn't look at her anymore. He tossed the phone onto the bed and stormed out of the room. His chest felt tight, his heart hammering like it was trying to break his ribs. He wanted to scream, to break something, but instead, He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, burying his head in his hands. Vanessa appeared at the bedroom door, tears streaming down her face. "Caleb, please. Just give me a chance to explain." He looked up, his gaze freezing her in place. "You already explained. With the texts. With the photos. There's nothing left to say." "You don't understand," she whispered. "It wasn't like that." Caleb stood up slowly. His movements were deliberate, terrifyingly calm. "Then how was it?" he asked, staring at her as if trying to see the stranger beneath the skin of his wife. "Enlighten me, Vanessa. Tell me exactly how it wasn't like that." She looked down, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake," she said, struggling to meet his eyes. "I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't want this to happen." Caleb stepped back, as if her words were physical blows. He walked past her into the living room, grabbed her phone from the bed where he'd thrown it, scrolled to a specific message, and shoved the screen in her face. "Didn't want it," he hissed. "Then what is this? You make me feel alive again. Is that a typo, Vanessa? Just a mistake?" She stayed silent, her lip quivering. "And this photo," he continued, his grip on the phone tightening until his knuckles were white. "Was this a mistake too? Did you accidentally open the camera, accidentally take your clothes off, and accidentally hit send?" "I was being stupid," she screamed finally, panic rising in her voice. "I just wanted. I don't even know. It was an escape. An escape from everything being so predictable. Predictable." Caleb stepped into her space, towering over her. His voice dropped to a whisper, but it was sharper than a knife. "You call our life predictable? The home we built? The marriage I thought was real?" Her eyes filled with fresh tears. She reached for his hand, but he recoiled as if she were radioactive. "It doesn't mean anything," she begged. "Ryan. He means nothing to me. It was just a moment of weakness." Caleb nodded, his face grim, almost emotionless. "A moment of weakness," he repeated flatly. "You know what I think? I think you planned this. Days, weeks, maybe months. And now you want me to just forget it?" She dropped to her knees, sobbing openly now. Her hands reached out for him, grasping at the air, but he stood like a statue, her desperation bouncing off him. "I'll fix it," she whispered. "I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." Caleb looked down at her, his expression hardening into stone. "You want my trust?" His voice was calm, but every word landed with the weight of a sledgehammer. "You destroyed everything, Vanessa. Everything I built. Everything I believed in. And now you want me to just get over it?" She covered her face with her hands, her body shaking with sobs. He watched her for a few seconds, then set the phone down on the table, turned around, and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door shut and locking it. The only sound left in the empty house was her muffled crying, echoing through a life that no longer existed. Caleb sat in the silence of the bedroom, staring at his phone screen. The search result glowed back at him: David Sterling, family law and divorce attorney. His thumb hovered over the call button. It felt heavy, like this one tap would be the final nail in the coffin. He took a deep breath, steeled himself, and pressed it. David Sterling's office, a receptionist answered, her voice crisp and efficient. "Hi, my name is Caleb. I need a consultation for a divorce," he said, his voice sounding steadier than he felt. "Of course, sir. Can you briefly tell us the nature of the inquiry?" Caleb gave the short version. "No file." The story, which he was now reciting on autopilot, didn't trigger the same rage anymore, just a cold, bitter aftertaste. "I understand," the receptionist said after a pause. "Mr. Sterling has an opening tomorrow morning. Can you bring any documentation you might have?" "Yes," Caleb replied. "I have everything." David Sterling's office in downtown Austin was exactly what Caleb expected: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake, polished mahogany tables, and an air of expensive competence. David, a sharp-looking man in a tailored navy suit, greeted Caleb with a firm handshake. "Have a seat," he offered, gesturing to a leather chair. Caleb reached into his bag, pulled out a flash drive, and slid it across the desk. It's all in there. Messages, photos, even a video I recorded when I caught them together. David picked up the drive, but didn't plug it in immediately. He looked Caleb in the eye. Before we start, I need to ask, is there any chance of reconciliation? Are you looking for a separation, or a clean break? Caleb didn't blink. No chance. She burned it down. I want out. David nodded and plugged the drive into his MacBook. His face remained impassive as he scrolled through the evidence, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. Finally, he leaned back. You're in a strong position, David said, closing the laptop. Texas is a community property state, but fault matters. We can prove that her adultery was the cause of the marriage's dissolution. That gives us leverage to argue for a disproportionate share of the estate. You said the house and car are in your name? The house is. The car is hers, but the loan is in my name. And most of the savings are from my salary. Good. Well, file immediately. Well, cite adultery as the grounds. Well, push to minimize any division of assets and ensure spousal support is off the table. Caleb nodded, feeling the knot of anxiety in his chest loosen slightly, replaced by a cold resolve. This was the first step to taking his life back. The proceedings moved faster than Caleb expected. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and David's aggressive strategy, Vanessa's lawyer advised her to settle. The agreement was brutal but fair. The judge signed off on the decree. Caleb kept the house, the bulk of the savings, and his retirement accounts. Vanessa walked away with her car and a small payout that barely covered her legal fees.
No alimony.
When the judge finalized the order, Caleb closed his eyes and exhaled. It wasn't a victory he wanted to celebrate with champagne, but it was the end of the war. Vanessa left the courtroom first. She looked smaller, paler. She didn't look back. David clapped a hand on Caleb's shoulder. You handled this well, Caleb. It's done. You're a free man. Caleb watched the double doors swing shut behind Vanessa. Her shadow no longer loomed over his future. He was free. That night, Caleb sat in his kitchen in the dark, spinning his phone on the table. His mind wasn't on Vanessa anymore. She was gone. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the photos, to the texts, and specifically to Ryan. The smug look on Ryan's face in that bathroom. The arrogance. Vanessa was just collateral damage now, but Ryan was a predator who had walked into Caleb's life and torched it without a second thought. Guys like him don't stop, Caleb thought. They keep doing it until someone stops them. The next night, Caleb went back to the Drifter. The bar was just as loud and chaotic as the night his life fell apart. He stood near the back wall, nursing a beer he didn't intend to drink, his eyes scanning the crowd. It didn't take long. Ryan was there. Just as Caleb suspected. He was holding court at the bar, laughing too loudly, clapping guys on the back, and leaning in close to a group of women who were politely entertaining him. Caleb took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. He pretended to be texting, but he opened the camera app, switched to video, and angled it discreetly. He started moving along the perimeter of the room, blending into the shadows. Ryan looked confident, in his element. He had shifted his attention to a brunette sitting alone at the corner of the bar. She was smiling, but her body language was guarded. Ryan's hand was already resting on the back of her chair, encroaching on her space. You always come here alone. Caleb heard Ryan say as he drifted close enough for the microphone to pick it up. His voice was lowered, smooth, practiced. Not always, the woman replied, taking a sip of her drink. Well, next time you see me, don't be shy, Ryan continued, flashing a grin. I'm always looking for good company. Caleb held his breath, his hand steady. It was the exact same playbook. The same lines. It was like watching a rerun of a bad movie. For the next 2 hours, Caleb watched and recorded. Ryan worked the room like a shark in a wading pool. He moved from one woman to another, testing the waters, recycling his lines. His behavior was predatory, systematic. Later, a tall blonde in a red dress seemed to be buying it. Ryan leaned in, whispering something in her ear that made her blush and laugh. He touched her arm, lingering. Caleb kept recording. Every frame was evidence. He didn't feel pity for these women, not yet. He felt a cold sense of duty. They didn't know who they were dealing with, but he was going to make sure they found out. By midnight, Caleb had enough. He slipped out of the bar as quietly as he had entered. Sitting in his Honda, he replayed the footage. Ryan was exactly who Caleb knew him to be, a manipulator, a player who built his ego on deception. Now came the second part of the plan. Caleb spent the next 2 days glued to his laptop. He edited the footage, adding captions to contextualize the scenes, pointing out the repeated lines, the rehearsed moves. He didn't just want to expose Ryan, he wanted to dismantle him. He wanted to make sure there was absolutely no room for doubt about what kind of man he was. When the video was polished, he created a burner account on Instagram and TikTok. He uploaded the reel and tagged the location. Then, he sent the direct link to a carefully curated list, women he knew through Vanessa, Ryan's drinking buddies, and the general inbox for the drifter. He didn't sign his name. He didn't add a commentary. He just let the truth do the heavy lifting. Within 24 hours, the video started to gain traction locally. The comments section turned into a war zone. People were tagging their friends, sharing the post, dissecting Ryan's behavior. Some bros tried to defend him, but the backlash was swift. Then came the testimonials. This guy pulled the exact same move on my roommate. She was wrecked for months when she found out he was lying about everything. I see this dude everywhere downtown. He's a total predator. Whoever posted this is doing the Lord's work. People need to know. Caleb read through the thread, feeling a strange mix of heaviness and relief. He hadn't expected it to change his life, but he knew he'd done the right thing. A week later, Caleb stopped by the Drifter one last time. The vibe was different, more tense, the staff on high alert. As he waited for a takeout order near the host stand, he overheard the manager talking to a bouncer. If that guy Ryan shows up again, don't even let him in the door.
S86D.
Permanently. Caleb smiled to himself. Karma had finally come to collect. Over the next few weeks, his life pivoted in a direction he hadn't anticipated. After the court order, Vanessa had moved out. She took her things and left a note on the kitchen counter, a generic apology and a wish for him to find happiness. Caleb didn't bother finishing it. The note went into the recycling bin before the front door even clicked shut behind him. Today was his first day with zero obligations. No lawyer meetings, no gathering evidence, no signing documents. For the first time in forever, Caleb could focus entirely on himself. And he intended to do just that. He decided to start the morning with a walk at Zilker Park. As he strolled along the trail, enjoying the Austin skyline, he noticed a small group gathered near the Great Lawn. It looked like some kind of outdoor boot camp. Caleb paused, curious. A young woman with boundless energy was waving at passers-by to join in. "Come on, don't be shy," she called out with a wide, genuine smile. "It's free, it's fun, and it beats sitting on the couch." Caleb hesitated for a split second. But then he remembered, his life was a blank slate now. Why not? He stepped into the back row, feeling a little self-conscious, but quickly realized no one cared about his rusty form. 5 minutes in, he was sweating and actually smiling at the trainer's jokes, feeling the tension of the last few months melting away in the Texas heat. After the session wrapped up, the instructor walked over to him. She had her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and a glow that seemed to come from within. "You did good," she said, handing him a spare bottle of water. "First time?" Caleb nodded, laughing breathlessly. "Yeah. I think I'm a little out of shape." "Nonsense," she waved him off. "The important thing is that you showed up. I'm Mia, by the way." "Caleb," he replied, shaking her hand. "Well, Caleb, see you at the next one?" she asked with a playful wink. "I think so," he said, surprising himself with the warmth in his voice. "Yeah." A few evenings later, he went back to the park. Mia was there, setting up for a sunset session. This time, he walked up to her before it started, offering her an iced coffee from a nearby trailer. She took it with a surprised smile. "You a regular now," she teased. "You could say that," he replied. "It helps." She nodded, her expression softening as if she understood exactly what he wasn't saying. "You know," she said, looking out at the sun dipping below the horizon. "Sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes." Her words stuck with him. He realized that maybe that was exactly what he had been missing, the belief that there was still light ahead. Months passed. Caleb's house began to fill with new life. He painted over the beige walls Vanessa had loved with bold, new colors. The shelves filled with books he actually wanted to read. He started writing again, landing a few freelance pieces in a local Austin publication. Occasionally, thoughts of Vanessa would drift through his mind, but they carried no anger or regret. She was just a chapter in a book he had finished reading. Mia became a part of this new chapter, too. They didn't rush anything. There were no grand declarations or heavy expectations. But her presence added a brightness to his days that he hadn't realized was missing. Caleb didn't feel like his life was broken anymore. Standing on his porch with a coffee in hand, looking out at his quiet street, he realized his life wasn't a wreck. It was a blank page, ready for whatever story he wanted to write next. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.